a running back competition for the Seattle Seahawks. Not what you would expect after Kenneth Walker having a sensational rookie season as running back for the Seahawks. But Pete Carroll said there's going to be somewhat of a battle. And I don't know if this is just smoke screens to get people to work harder in the offseason or make it more exciting of a competition within the building. But the Seahawks drafted Zach Cabernet, and Pete Carroll on Seattle Sports Radio, I think it was on Stacey and Bob, said that he will battle running back Kenneth Walker for the role in the offseason. Like I said, Pete Carroll could be saying this to make it a good competition. But you got to remember, the Seahawks do weird shit like this sometimes. Before you go on in this video, make sure you like, subscribe. I do all Seattle sports, Seahawks, Mariners, other stuff for fun. Please like and subscribe stuff, Mariner stuff, all these different things through our shop. So please make sure you follow those on Twitter and DM me on Instagram ever if you want to talk sports. But let's talk about this. This is very interesting. So while the Seahawks drafted Kenneth Walker in the second round last year, he went on to lead all rookies in carries at 228, rushing yards. He had over 1,000 rushing yards. He had 1,050. And he went on to lead the team in touchdowns, rushing touchdowns, with 9. So he had 228 carries, 1,050 yards, and 9 touchdowns. And somehow the Seahawks wanted to still draft 2 running backs, which I'm not blaming them. I'm just saying somehow. They took UCLA's Zach Cabernet in the second round with the 52nd pick, and they used their final pick on Georgia's running back, Kenny McIntosh, in the 7th round. I think I said Bob and Stacey before. I meant Bump and Stacey. Bump and Stacey on Seattle Sports is where a lot of this came from. Carroll said that he has so much respect for the running back position, and he knows how much it matters to a team's physicality, mentally, the mentality, whatever it is for a team, that he wanted to have more. He said, quote unquote, on Bump and Stacey, Seattle Sports Radio, I have so much respect for that position and so much regard for what that weighs into our football team and how we play and the mentality, all of that. It's really an important spot for me too. We do a nice job. We had some terrific guys over the years, and I think we just put this class back together in a really good spot for this position. At this time, we usually are used to the Seahawks having so many different running backs on the roster like Travis Homer and Rashad Penny and Kenneth Walker and DJ Dallas. But that wasn't the case this offseason. Going to the draft, DJ Dallas was the only other running back on the roster with Kenneth Walker. And, you know, we had a very below average rushing attack, 18th best in the NFL at 120 rush yards per game. And a guy like Pete Carroll wants more. And here's one thing that going through the stats and watching some things on YouTube is with Kenny McIntosh and Zach Cabernet, there's an added element when it comes to pass catching. And I think that's what's something that Pete Carroll really liked, and he ended up talking about it as well. In talking about Zach Cabernet in general, he said he will fit in just right and be a great addition, and we're going to find out how far he can take it in terms of receiving part of it. We know he's really good at it, but so is Kenneth, so those guys will be battling. And we also went all the way down to get Kenny McIntosh because of his versatility. There's so many positives about these guys. At the end of the day, Pete Carroll does think this is obviously going to make the life of Geno Smith easier, kind of like the days of Russell Wilson when you had a guy like Marshawn Lynch, or even you had a guy like Sean Alexander that made Matt Hasselbeck's life a lot easier. Now, we're not talking about just a star here like Beast Mode and like Sean Alexander, but if you can build a very promising group, you never know where that can take you. Just to explain a little bit about what kind of numbers these guys are putting up, let's start with Zach Cabernet. He played 2 years at Michigan and then went over to UCLA for 2 years. But let's just look at his last 2 seasons at UCLA. He obviously transferred because he got a lot less time at Michigan in 2020, and it was a shortened year, so his stats just don't pop. 2020 was a weird year for stats. But his junior year, he had played 12 games. He had 203 attempts, 1,100 yards, 13 touchdowns. He also had 24 catches for 197 yards. In 2022, his senior year, he had 195 carries in 10 games, 1,300 yards. So we're talking about 2 less games, 8 less carries, but he had 220 more yards. He had 14 touchdowns on the year, and he added 37 catches for 321 yards. So in general, he had a very good season. 232 plays, 1,680 yards, scrimmage yards, and 14 touchdowns. And we can say the same thing about Kenny McIntosh at Georgia. And he was even a little more versatile when it came to the passing game. At the end of the day, McIntosh stayed all 4 years at Georgia. He only played 4 games his freshman year. Sophomore year, he played 8. And then the last 2 seasons when things started to kick up for him, he only had 48 rushing attempts his junior year, 328 yards, 3 touchdowns, but he had 22 catches, 242 yards, and 2 touchdowns there. But senior year is where he's really taken his game up a notch. He had 140 rushing attempts, 829 yards. He ended up with 10 touchdowns. And on the passing end, he had 43 catches for 500 yards and 2 touchdowns. So overall, 192 plays at scrimmage, 1,334 yards, and 12 touchdowns. And this is what Pete Carroll is talking about when it comes to versatility. Both these guys not only had some decent stats running, especially Zach Cabernet, but they also were in the passing game. Both of them were over 1,000 scrimmage yards. Both of them were over 10 touchdowns. Passing, rushing, both of them. Versatility. And at the end of the day, this is what the Seahawks are going to do. They are going to give plays to Cabernet. They're going to give plays to McIntosh and to Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker's obviously, I think regardless of what Pete Carroll says, is obviously going to get most of the load. But just like other years, even last year when you have a guy like Kenneth Walker, you'd have those DJ Dallas plays and those Travis Homer plays. And obviously you'd have Rashad Penny, but he gets hurt. And that's another thing in the NFL. Depth at the running back position is always good. We've seen it with Rashad Penny. A year where he looks all right, gets hurt. A year where he looks great, he gets hurt again. People get hurt in the NFL, especially the running back position is very possible. There's a reason right now in the NFL people are not paying running backs that much. Maybe Derrick Henry is like a really, what's the word? Asterisk on it. A very different type of situation because he's a completely different player. Maybe a Nick Chubb as well. But in general, people aren't paying running backs very much. They're not picking up their options on running backs, the fifth-year options as much, because you can get a lot of guys' in positions. It sucks to say, but it's a lot of rinse and repeat. Get people in, get people out. Some injuries happen. You got to move on. Somebody overpays a guy a little bit. You got to say okay and let it go. You're talking about teams like the Dallas Cowboys who had Ezekiel Elliott. He was like the face of the franchise for a few years. They're not signing him this year. That's just how the running back position works. There's those couple guys, like I mentioned, Chubb, Henry, maybe Saquon Barkley, that are like the workhorses for multiple years. But this is how the NFL game works. So am I surprised Pete Carroll came out already and said there's going to be a little bit of a battle for the workload? Yes, I am surprised. I actually am because Kenneth Walker had such a good year. But at the same time, this is the reality of football. So it is what it is. I think it's exciting. This team has just done so well in the draft the last 2 years. Obviously, these guys haven't played yet in the 2023 draft, but 2022 draft was like an A+. This is looking like an A+ draft on paper, on film, but I'm so excited to actually see it play out, and that's what we're going to get soon. Coming here, August, September. It's coming faster than you know, so it is time. I'm so excited to see, and let's go win some football games. Make sure you check out the channel. Like I said, I have all Seattle sports stuff. I love you all for the support, and